Rooted Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is April 29th, Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. Well, top stories in the news today. Trump has alluded to the fact that he is not ending the naval blockade of Iran. That won't happen. And the war, for many Americans, and it seems for Trump, people are seeing the war in Iran lasting for quite some time. If this is Iran's strategy not to come to the table, to keep stalling, we hope hostilities don't begin again. I would suggest they do, but that's just my take on it. Also, Jimmy Kimmel triples down on his insult of the Trump family, what Melania Trump and Donald Trump had to go through with the assassination attempt. Some people said that he brought it on, and we're going to look again at the fact that media personalities, not just celebrities, but people in the news as well, in the mainstream media, have a lot to do with this rising rancor TDS surrounding Donald Trump. Assassination is not funny. There's nothing to joke about the death of somebody. And Jimmy Kimmel went on to say, oh, it was just because of his age. Regardless, shouldn't be making fun of people dying. Yeah, is it a joke? Yeah, I'm all for jokes and stuff, but when you have continued assassination, political violence, rise in political violence, particularly from the left, you can see that you're stoking the fire and that you should cease and desist. All right, before we go into anything further, let's get into the headlines for today, Wednesday, April 29th. We're going to start with Mediaite. If you haven't seen this picture yet, it's actually pretty funny. It's Trump holding an AR with bombs dropping in the background, and he's wearing aviators. And in the Mediaite article says, Trump vows no more Mr. Nice Guy in 4 a.m. Iran threat featuring image of himself with a gun. Oh no, he's got a gun. He's got a gun. Is he a felon? Has he been convicted of being a felon? I don't know. I think he could still own a gun if he wanted to. I think all this nonsense around because someone had a gun. It's not like it's perfectly normal for someone to have a gun. Particularly depending where you are, what sort of incidents you're going to envision to encounter during the day. When I first moved to Arizona, and that's the first time I encountered open carry, I was a little taken aback when people had sidearms, shopping at Smitty's or whatever. But after a while, you get used to it. And once, I lived there for a few years, it's part of the culture. Zero Hedge, most Americans expect prolonged conflict with Iran. Most U.S. adults oppose the war with Iran and say the U.S. should make a deal to end the war as fast as possible. But that's not going to happen. And it's not Trump's fault. It's really Iran's fault. They're trying to find a way out of this. Good luck. I don't know. I don't get it. You know what I mean? I don't understand. They keep going to other countries, Russia. They didn't go to China yet, but trying to involve their Gulf neighbors and try to get people on their side. And okay, but that's not going to change the situation, which is unimpeded aerial bombardment and naval blockades. So they don't want to give it up. So we'll see what happens. It might be a prolonged thing now. I don't think that's great. Obviously, I wasn't for this. But strategically, that seems the way it's going to go. It's going to be a war of attrition. And what's going to happen to Iran? This isn't going to take months or years. It's going to take weeks. So with the blockade, what are they going to do? Right? Because even if they get other weapons during a ceasefire, you're in a ceasefire, so you can't fire the weapons. The game changer obviously would be these Chinese sophisticated long-range anti-ship missiles that could reach out into the Arabian Sea and strike the U.S. Navy. We'll see if that happens. I don't think that's going to happen. Wall Street Journal, story number 3. Trump tells aides to prepare for extended blockade of Iran. The president prefers decisive victories, but none of the available options provides him with a swift exit from the conflict. No, because the way conflicts end are conditions on the ground. So if conditions on the ground are not changing, there's not going to be an exit from this conflict. So I just talked about that. And the Wall Street Journal seems to trumpet that, no pun intended, as sort of a victory over Trump. I mean, it's going to extend things, but at least people aren't getting killed, right, for the time being. So I think the naval blockade is being successful. And I would urge him tactically, or part of the strategy, to continue this and prepare for renewed bombardment. But also, the longer we don't restart hostilities, it makes us appear more moral in the conflict, and that, because it's always not about aggression. You know, there's that whole PR thing with war. New York Post, Trump complains Iran can't get their act together and sign a nuclear deal as war passes 2-month mark. Yeah, he said 6 weeks. So let's take away, it's almost 3 weeks now of the ceasefire. Let's take that away, and we're only at week 4 of hostilities. So, and we're monitoring what's happening on the ground through our satellite imagery. We'll see. They don't want to give up their strategy, which was Iran's strategy was to obtain a nuclear device and then use it as a threat to forestall, I wouldn't say to block, but forestall a military action, conventional bombardment of their country. So they don't want to give that up, obviously. If they weren't, they don't need nuclear power. They have more oil they know what to do with. So, and they're obviously, with the enrichment capacity and what have you, they're going for a nuclear weapon. Do people want that? I don't know. That's the ultimatum the U.S. is given. And I think it's smart to do that. Like I said, I didn't agree with the policy decision to go to war. But sometimes you have to trust your official. And I don't mean trust like, I believe everything you say and do, but trust people that have the intelligence to make the right decisions. One American News, article number 5, Trump, Iranian officials say country is in a state of collapse. I just want to fix one thing here and take this opportunity to ask you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the podcast. We have about 34 headlines to get through. We're at story number 5 here. Don't forget to join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream, 10 a.m. Again, I probably will not have a live stream tomorrow or Friday. I will give you the lowdown on why that was or why that's going to be, maybe over the weekend or Monday. So bear with me. Okay, so back to this story here. One American News: Trump, Iranian officials say country is in a state of collapse. Iran has just informed us that they are in a state of collapse. They want us to open the Hormuz Strait as soon as possible as they try to figure out their leadership situation, which I believe they'll be able to do. This diplomatic pivot follows a period of frustration as peace negotiations seemingly descend into definitive stalemate. The shift has punctuated or was punctuated by President Trump's decision to abruptly withdraw the United States delegation from its scheduled journey to Pakistan, where it was intended to participate in mediated discussions with the Iranian officials. The Iranian officials don't want to negotiate. For us, not willing to give up your nuclear program, that's a non-starter. For them, keeping their nuclear program, that's a non-starter for them, or not being able to keep their nuclear program. Let's get back into the story, though. Economic and labor collapse. As of late April, the war has reportedly eliminated over 130,000 direct jobs and 600,000 indirect ones. The Iranian labor establishment itself has warned of total market breakdown. Infrastructure damage, significant military and industrial infrastructure has been deployed following U.S. and Israeli strikes that began in late February. This has severely hampered Iran's ability to produce energy and maintain domestic logistics. Digital blackout. Iran has been under a regime-imposed internet blackout for nearly 60 days since February 28th. This has not only silenced dissent, but has acted as an economic weapon, paralyzing online commerce and payments that many Iranian households rely on for survival. And also the Strait of Hormuz blockade. The ongoing tug of wheels in the Strait of Hormuz has essentially cut off Iran's primary economic artery, leading to extreme inflation and shortages of basic goods. That's the breakdown. So regardless, it's situation on the ground stuff. Regardless of what people are saying in public, what Iran wants or doesn't want to do, if they want to decline, have an economic decline and market fall, and just continue along that way, as long as they keep their nuclear material, the fissile material, that's not going to work out for them because it's a country of 90 million people. You can't have them plunge into an economic catastrophe. Are we going to run around hitting people with rubber hoses? It's not going to work. I mean, it does work, but all authoritarian regimes usually break down, depending on the size of the population, of course. All right, let's move on to another big story that we've been following since the weekend, which is the assassination attempt on President Donald Trump. Now, a lot of people say there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and, I would agree, but let's go with what we know. And funny things happen. This isn't the Las Vegas shooting. That was full of so many anomalies and stranger things. We could go for hours and days documenting what the hell went on in Las Vegas. This seems fairly straightforward. Regular leftists get so mad, probably on medication, takes a train all the way across country. Remember that guy that flew from LA with a handgun to Florida I forget who he was trying to kill, somebody. Again, this happens again, so it's happened before. I would say he's a wind-up toy. He was obviously wound up, could have been wound up by the Trump administration. But more than likely, more explainable is the left wound him up and has been wanting to wind up people for some time. to kill Donald Trump because they're doing everything they can in their power to attack Donald Trump, try to put him in jail. You know, remember Bolsonaro in Brazil? He got shot, or was it stabbed? They tried to assassinate him. They tried to keep him from running, and they put him in jail. You know, it's very similar. Same thing with Trump. Trump didn't do anything wrong. I mean, let's be real. He's not a criminal. And the left says he's a criminal, which just goes to show that their mind has been taken over by Trump derangement syndrome, i.e., they've succumbed to military-style propaganda, trying to engineer a subversion of popular conservatism, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Los Angeles Times: mysteries surround Cole Thomas Allen and his final movements in D.C. attack. Some key details remain unknown, including exactly what went wrong during those frantic seconds at the hotel and what motivated him. This is the Los Angeles Times, so, dude, we know what motivated him. He said it. He called Trump a pedophile, which Trump is not a convicted pedophile in any case. Called him a rapist, right? You might be able to call him a felon, but you can't call him a rapist, all right? Because he hasn't been criminally convicted of rape nor pedophilia. But he used those two examples almost to highlight his stupidity. What we know: federal authorities charge Allen, 31, with transporting firearms across state lines while traveling by train from California to Washington, and with discharging a firearm during the incident at the Washington Hilton, where officials said a federal agent was shot in his ballistic vest. I mean, that's what we know, and we know about the manifesto. I don't think transporting a firearm by train, I don't think is illegal across state lines. So I believe the law is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the law is if you transport a firearm across state lines to commit a crime. And this is if, obviously, the firearm is legal in both states, obviously. The exception, I believe, according to the ATF, is SBRs, or short-barreled rifles, which is a rifle with a removable magazine that has a barrel that's smaller. I think the law is now 16 inches. And you can't transport them across state line without ATF, obviously, permission or notification or something like that. I think that's what the law is. The timeline: it remains unclear whether he fired shots before his arrest. A Secret Service agent was wounded, and officials have not conclusively determined who was responsible for that. Okay. No one's talking because it's an active investigation and will likely go to trial. He might take a plea deal, who knows? But what we do know from the acoustics is a shotgun blast, and then you hear 5 rounds. Pow, 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 pow. And it sounds like one pistol shooting 5 rounds consecutively, because that's how you do it. Pow, 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 pow. So it sounded like, and if that were the case, the person that has the weapon pointed at them is the one that's shooting, right? And if there were multiple people shootings, they'd be overlap. You'd hear pa 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 pa. You know, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't sound like that. Now, they don't know. Now, the left is saying that one of the agents behind, because you see it in the surveillance, they're drawing their weapon. There's nothing conclusive that makes it look like any of those agents fired. Besides, if that other agent was in the way, they wouldn't do that. But the left is suggesting that one of those agents did fire towards a suspect, hitting the other Secret Service agent. I don't think that's what happened. I think this guy fired into this guy's chest with buckshot, said he was wounded. I'd like to know how. I'd also like to see evidence of the wound, but again, this is an act of arrest, so you probably won't see that. What my problem is when somebody is killed and there's not going to be a trial or anything else, is that they should just release that to the public. Like, here's a picture of the guy's wounds. He was shot. Here's a picture of the vest. You know, here's a picture of the guy with a few pellet wounds. Something. Wounded agent, a Secret Service officer, was shot once in the chest. Right. I think this is shotgun. According to a federal filing against Allen, the officer then drew his service weapon and fired multiple times at Allen, who fell to the ground and suffered minor injuries but was not shot. So there you go. It seems to all be falling into place here. He was not injured, so it looks suffered minor injuries but was not shot. So it looks like he fired the shotgun while running and fell. Either fell and hurt himself, was hurt during the arrest. But it looks like he fired at the guy, probably sent him off balance. He fell, and that's why he wasn't hit with the pistol rounds. As far as getting into exact ballistics, I'm not going to do that today because it's still being looked at and finalized. There you go. We want those finalized, though, right? We want the ballistics finalized. We want to know where each round went. And that's what you have to do with ballistics, not just, oh, that's the important round. It's where every round that was fired, everybody that heard a report, we got to know where that bullet goes. Motive. I would still go through most everyone here. I would still go through most everyone here to get to the targets it were absolutely necessary, on the basis that most people choose to attend a speech by a pedophile, rapist, and traitor, and thus are complicit. I really hope it doesn't come to that. All right, this is from his manifesto. Pedophile, rapist, and traitor. Donald Trump is none of those things. And so you're planning a cross-country trip to assassinate the President of the United States under false pretense. Right? Because Trump isn't a pedophile. It doesn't matter what the leftists say. He's not a convicted pedophile, convicted rapist, and he's certainly a convicted traitor. But this is what the leftists believe. Lies, propaganda, deception, demonization. Fox News alleged Trump assassination plot analysis shows 1 in 5 left-wing posts cry hoax, admin shreds moron claims. Yeah, 1 in 5 left-wing posts probably on Blue Sky, or maybe 5 in 5, or 5 out of 5 on Blue Sky, 1 in 5 on Twitter or X. One American News, again, DOJ files motion demanding White House ballroom construction be allowed to continue after White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. This is story number 8. And you know me, I always start a little slow. I'm a little too verbose. So this is what the leftists claim, is that this was staged so he could push through his White House ballroom. This is what Trump was complaining about. The White House needs a large functionary space. He's a builder, so he's the best type of guy to do that. I mean, you wouldn't want Gerald Ford trying to put on a ballroom, right? So I don't know what the big deal is. Now, obviously, if this is a developed operation, right? It's a construct by the Trump administration. That would be bad. But until I see evidence of that, I'm going to go with my original theory, which is people are communicating over the internet. They don't know who they're talking to. They're probably talking to sheep dip agents or whomever, people posing as your friends, and they nudge you when the time is right after all the other internet suspects, social media companies, whatever, feed you the information to get you in that state of mind to then be nudged or triggered. Fox News, story number 9, 10 celebrities who have joked about Trump's death, from Kathy Griffin to Jimmy Kimmel. Late night host is the latest in a long line of celebrities who have joked about Trump's death. Right. Assassination isn't funny. Wasn't funny for Anwar Sadat. Wasn't funny for Abraham Lincoln. Not funny for Trump. Let's see how these dupe people could go, yay, killing the leader of our country. That's good. That's a good thing. Really, really. All right, so let's go down the list. I don't even know this person. Leah Delaria. I think she's Charlie Sheen, Kathy Griffin, Madonna, Johnny Depp, Carol Cook. I don't know who that is either. George Lopez, Kyle Gass of Tenacious D, Michael Shea of Saturday Night Live, and of course, Jimmy Kimmel. Wall Street Journal, Jimmy Kimmel mocks Trump again after FCC opens review of ABC TV licenses. President Trump called for Kimmel to be fired for a joke he made last week about Melania Trump. It was a joke, and I'm not saying you can't have jokes, but what I'm saying is ABC needs to be held more responsible. And if it's a joke written for him, well, who approved the joke? Who wrote the joke? Like I said, it's this drumbeat, this psychic driving that lead people to do things. So even if that joke in itself isn't threatening, in a long line of non-threatening jokes, it might be. You have to put it into context. So the best way to investigate it is like take the Jimmy Kimmel show, or ABC as a whole, but the Jimmy Kimmel show, see how many jokes he told that could lead somebody to believe that killing the president of the United States is a good thing. And right from the story, Jimmy Kimmel doubled down on his criticism of President Trump during his show on Tuesday. That was yesterday, one day after the president called for his firing. So it was Monday night and Tuesday night, both those nights he doubled down. So technically he tripled down, because Monday he doubled down. TJ Media, Gutfeld torches the media's role in the White House Correspondents Association dinner shooting. I was going to play a clip from this. Maybe I'll a brief clip from Gutfeld on the 5.
Because it's only a one-way thing. You mentioned some examples like the Pelosi thing, which is a mental illness thing. The Wisconsin thing, we still aren't sure what the hell happened there. The Whitmer thing was a plot. Who created the plot? That would take an entire special to go under. I disagree with Jesse. This guy did hear voices. They were Tim Waltz's, they were Ted Lieu's, they were Brandon Johnson's, they were CNN's, they were The View, they were MS Now. Okay. I think this is a helpful assassination attempt because it is the first one to show that you can be radicalized by liberal smugness. If you read his posts and if you read his manifesto, it sounds like every smarmy, sanctimonious, self-satisfied pronouncement from an asshole like Brandon Johnson, like Waltz, like Lieu, the people who think they know better than you. This guy was not a crank. He was not deranged. Don't buy into that narrative because it lets these pompous asses off. He didn't do this because, as Jesse said, he didn't have voices in his head. He was just following orders. He was operating on a filter that said Trump was Hitler, and therefore it would be immoral if you didn't take Hitler out. So his filter is actually making him logical. He's the sanest one in the group because he took them at their word. When MS now says Trump is Hitler, he's the sensible one. He went out and went after Hitler. Now, if you told him he was wrong, would he listen? No, because you know this guy. You've run into this guy. They think they're right. This is the big point. The biggest problem, and I don't include you in this, Harold, the problem with the left is the lack of humility. This is what has always bothered people on the right. We believe in a higher power. We could be wrong. But for something for the left, they can have ideas which turn into belief, which turn into an ideology, and there's no breaks to it, i.e. a higher power that might say, you know what? You could be wrong. This is a guy that when you read his stuff, he is right on everything. When you read his posts, when you read his, and then if something disappoints him, it's everybody's fault. This is exactly the same kind of person you run into at BLM, at Antifa,
There you go with
at any protest.
You have Greg. I wanted to play the whole thing, but it's only halfway through. So he made all the correct points though, right? So you talk to this guy, he's completely, they seem leftists out of left field. They don't get your point, and they're so sure. And why are they so sure of what they believe? Is because their ideology, their ideas buttressed on all sides by their peers in real life, their peers on the internet, their virtual peers, and by their idols on TV, et cetera, et cetera. So Greg Gutfeld has it absolutely right there. Let's just see. Because something weird happened there. I'm sorry about that. It was like a tech snafu where all my screens went away. I don't know what happened. So there's Greg Gutfeld. Next story. Story number 12. One America News. Now, you've heard of this, right? DOJ files second indictment against former FBI Director James Comey. Well, that's great news. That is great news. And what is that buttressed up against? It looks like Todd Blanche is going to be the attack dog. That goes right up against an assistant of Fauci was arrested for covering up the origins of COVID and the way they were dealing with it and talking about it. They obviously knew more than they were saying. But there's more. There's more. One American News again. Minnesota federal agents execute coordinated series of raids zeroing in on rampant fraud in the Twin Cities. So here you have Todd Blanche again. You got the DOJ going after fraud in Minnesota once again. Next up, the Federalist. In my lovely state, story number 14, Connecticut Democrats move bills to force vaccines on unwilling adults. Is that all I have from there? Hold on a second. I thought for sure I had text on that because that's my state. I will tell you what happened here. Oh my gosh, something happened. Excuse me, folks. That's weird. Let's see if I can find the rest of it. Yeah, here it is. That was weird. Like I had a total snafu there. All my windows disappeared and everything got Yeah, okay. So here's the text. Yeah, so my order might be completely screwed up too. Let's go into the story here. The supermajority in my lovely state of Connecticut, which is ironic because it's the Constitution state. The supermajority Democrat legislature of Connecticut, hold on a second, has passed a radical vaccine standards bill in an apparent display of power directed at President Donald Trump and Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The legislation ensures that our state immunization standards are grounded in the consensus of professional judgment of the nation's leading medical and public health practitioners, not the ideological agenda of the Trump regime, said Senate President Martin Looney, Democrat of New Haven, and State Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff, who I know. HB 5044, an act establishing Connecticut vaccine standards. Democrats are insisting the bill does not mandate any vaccine, but will simply ensure all Connecticut residents have access to them. The Republicans, Senator Rob Sampson, called it out Thursday as an anti-freedom vaccine mandate, which it is. I know the state very well. I know exactly what they're doing. And when they say to ensure, when government says they want to ensure something, that's danger. That means they're going to mandate. Ensure equals mandate. State immunization standards, so they're talking about the vaccines that they want to give you, are legitimized, grounded in the consensus, legitimized by professionals in the industry, right, who could be working for Big Pharma, in the leading medical and public health practitioners, so actual practicing doctors, or pharmaceutical folks, pharmacists, not the ideological agenda of the Trump regime. Now, they use the word here, regime. Trying to actually send a message to Connecticut residents, particularly Connecticut residents that value freedom, me, gun owners, me, homeschoolers, well, I don't have kids, people concerned about religious freedom, me, and he explained on Newsmax, and they're sending a message to them that they're just not welcome in our state. And I don't feel welcome in this state, of course, any longer. And that's why we keep seeing these bills one after another, just empowering the government, supermajority. That's what happens when the Democrats get into power, then they circle the wagons and make sure never take away that power. Power in the government basically making a threat to people that value liberty. And that's why more and more of my friends and some of family members, relatives, what have you, moving to Florida, a free state, low taxes, where you could just live your life. Because I have friends that have kids in school and they don't like the vaccine schedule and they don't want to have their kids get all these immunizations. And Connecticut is just pushing vaccines. Its key provision, including expanding the power of unelected commissioner of public health to establish the standard of care for immunization for residents of this state, requiring health insurance policies to cover immunizations within the established standard or care, so whatever the vaccine companies charge. Updating regulations for nursing homes to ensure all the residents get their shots, protected by adequate immunization against respiratory viral disease. Now, my mother-in-law, when she was in nursing home, they wanted to push the COVID vaccine on her, and then when she did get COVID, they wanted to put her on remdesivir, and she got to say no. Don't forget, you're in charge of your own health care. If you ever give that up, that's giving up freedom. And of course, also they talk about religious freedom protections do not apply to certain vaccine requirements. That's what happened when I got let go. For my journalism job, it was the same thing. That was what they did. I made a religious exemption. They go, nope, we don't have to. We're a private company. Yeah, got screwed up. Brooke Rollins reveals 1,400 Snap recipients driving luxury vehicles in one state alone. Among the brands driven were Tesla, Alfa Romeo, Porsche, Ferrari, and Lamborghini, which means 14,000 of the SNAP recipients, whatever state this is, it's probably Minnesota, are driving luxury vehicles, which means it's a scam. It's fraud. So I believe Brooke Rollins is the Secretary of Agriculture, right? Federalist Virginia Supreme Court denies Dem AG's attempt to ram through gerrymander vote certification. So if you don't know who this guy was, yeah, I don't know what happened to all the text. It's weird. All the text was like separated out and then put in another folder. Crazy. Yeah, so the AG, what was this guy's name? He was the guy that threatened a rival political opponent that he would come and kill his children or something like that. What the hell is this guy's name? Now I forget. I don't have the text. But in any case, the court denied the gerrymandering. Then they denied this guy's appeal. I think they did it on racial lines, and that's what the courts are going to look at. Excuse me. Just the news, major scandal. Feds and Senator Johnson allege government cover-up of COVID origins, vaccine deaths. Oh, there is more. Yeah, and I don't, is it really? That is the craziest thing. So, all the text, not the title pages, all the text into another folder. Let me try something. Yeah, it got screwed up. I'm sorry to bore you with this, but yeah, something got really screwed up there. I don't know what happened. Weird. Yeah, so all the text from, let's see if I can even find this story. No, it's SPL. Right, I think it's this story. So in any case, if you didn't hear, David Morenz was a senior advisor to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Control Director Anthony Fauci. Right, and Morenz was indicted for destroying subpoenaed evidence. Same thing with Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton should have been indicted. If you destroy federally subpoenaed evidence, that's a crime, or if your people do it or whatever. So Morenz got indicted for that. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations Chair Ron Johnson, Republican senator from Wisconsin, is following up the disclosure of alleged cover-up of COVID origins with what he calls a Food and Drug Administration cover-up of lethal COVID vaccine injuries. FDA knew COVID vaccines were showing safety signals for mass death. And Johnson says, we got the documents. I'm going to bounce around. SPLC. I'll just give you this one here, just the news. 10 years of Biden weaponization produced enemy list that makes Watergate water under the bridge. They didn't have a list. But they did it. We knew the Obama administration was weaponizing the federal government. I certainly did it against Trump, but when Obama was making enemies of journalists, giving them subpoenas for their sources, and also going for after conservative companies like Harley Davidson with the IRA, et cetera, et cetera. The Federalist Senator, Biden agency used Benghazi to hide emails on Planned Parenthood loans. So I'm going to try to figure out that story is also totally messed up my whole program here. I don't know what the hell happened. The powers that be, it has to be, because that's never happened before. And there's a lot of stuff to cover here. I'll have to try to bounce back and forth. No, I don't have any text on that one. But I will tell you what it is. Is so the Biden, what is happening? The Biden administration used Benghazi in parenthesis in the subject line because they knew that couldn't apply because of a former ruling during Obama about Benghazi, that they couldn't subpoena that for freedom of information if it had Benghazi in it. So they hid it. They put Benghazi on the email so it couldn't be subpoenaed. And then they hid huge loans to places like Planned Parenthood. I think it was $9 million. That was really illegal because it was paycheck. It was to supply paychecks during COVID. And the threshold amount of what a company makes, somebody as big as Planned Parenthood didn't always qualify. So there was some whether or not they qualified. SPLC double game funding extremists while spending millions in swing state Southern elections. Also, you have to understand that Planned Parenthood contributes to the Democratic Party. So it's a funding stream, the circle jerk. It goes around and around. The Democrats allow money to go to people that fund the Democratic Party. Look at this. It's a complete meltdown. Sorry about that. And the SPLC does the same thing. They get funding from Democrats and then they turn around and fund Democrats. Get it? Just the news again. Comer requests all of Metropolitan Police Department data related to internal investigations into manipulated DC crime data. So yeah, Bowser, the mayor of DC, and her police force were suppressing actual crime data, and that has a lot to do with when the feds came in to clear up the crime, they started doing their own data, and it didn't match up to what the Metropolitan Police had. And it turns out that the Metropolitan Police were doing what the FBI always did also, is suppress certain types of crime data. National Review, are preppers deluded? No, they're not. No, they're not. Let's see if I can. I have to bounce through like different folders just to get over there. This was from the New York Times. This was a commentary on the New York Times article that I covered yesterday about prepping. But the National Review says the New York Times has a provocative column by Kit Dillon on preppers and what we really need during an emergency. He takes a paradigmatic, the prepper. He takes as a paradigmatic the prepper obsession with bug out bags. What do you pack when the shit hits the fan? Water, tablets, medicines, bandages, tools, weapons, and gear you'll need to survive a general collapse of civilization. Yes, but this author tends to make fun of preppers. Bug out bags is something you keep in your car or close by your car that you put in your car that has shit you're going to need if you're out and about. So good walking shoes, warm clothes, extra rain gear, some snack bars, energy bars, water, maybe a first aid kit, something, and preferably in a bag that you can, in a knapsack, you could wear. And then with your hiking shoes and your warm clothes, if you have to walk anywhere, because if there's an EMP, nothing's going to work. So you're going to need to walk. So that's a bug out bag. And for more advanced people, pop tent food, water. He goes on to say that he thinks most preppers of any serious sort have internalized this already, but they know their stockpilers would be shared. Not true. That's the reason you have firearms. But you're going to take your stockpile, you're going to be prepared, and then every friggin' zombie that comes to your door, oh, sure, here's a biscuit. Maybe if you have neighbors and a community and you want to be cohesive in that community, it's a great way to do it. You know, just make sure it's a great, hey, buddy, you get this, I'll get stores of this, we'll share. I mean, that I don't mind, but everybody who comes to your door, you're not going to be giving stuff. But so they know their stockpiles would be shared if needed. A bug out bag is useful if you have a localized disaster and really need to bug out quickly, say a nuclear plant meltdown, wildfire, or flood. I think the prepper community is good for helping people think through some of their dependencies on modern technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that most people could benefit from just reading the various lists of supplies that might be important on hand in an emergency, but they don't share those, right? Because they want to criticize that. 3 months, food, water, any supplies you would need to be in the basement for 3 months. Then, of course, you have a bug out bag where you would need to transfer all that stuff into your car if your car runs or whatever. But your bug out bag is really in your car. Change of clothes, warmer clothes, walking shoes, water, energy bars. Then they close it out by saying, yes, preppers often go overboard in imagining that civilization itself will fall apart in an extended length of time. I don't need to go any further than that, except saying 2 weeks without electricity and everything breaks down. 2 weeks without electricity. That's all it takes. All right, still going back and forth here, and I'm hitting the hour mark. What else should we cover? SPLC, preppers, Portland woman. Oh my gosh. Portland woman pleads guilty for assaulting ICE agents after freeing illegal alien from detention van. Tamika Gardner, 41 of Portland, struck several officers in the face while interfering with a lawful arrest. Yeah, what is that? Portland, Oregon? What do you expect? Oh, this is also a big story. Breaking news, just the news. Dying to vote. North Carolina removes 34,000 dead people from voter rolls. Also, the Fox News has this article, Trump election integrity push exposes massive amount of dead people in North Carolina voter rolls. Findings came as the state board began digging into its rolls to verify citizenship status of registered voters. Right again, I hate it. There's certain statistical facts that you just have to kind of go along with. Otherwise, you're not a serious thinker. Just like this guy tried to assassinate the president, presumably, allegedly. He's not a serious thinker. He didn't look into all these claims he was making. Fox News UN-backed data undercuts viral Gaza famine claims as child malnutrition falls. Child malnutrition cases peaked at 17,000 in August before falling to 3,000 by March 2026. That's the World Food Program. You could dispute these numbers, but the Gazans and Hamas were way inflating their numbers on everything and in deaths and everything. It's not really genocide. And not that it's not bad. It's bad, but Reuters, Fed likely to hold rates. Excuse me. Fed likely to hold rates steady at what may be last meeting of Powell era. That's why it's Reuters, just funny. Powell era. He's a chair of the board. I wouldn't call it an era. But people in finance would probably call it an era. Fox News court sentences former world leader to 7 years in prison for resisting arrest, other charges. And this is Yoon in South Korea. He's the one that was complaining that the South Korean government was completely infiltrated by communists and the North, and they were giving secrets to the North, all things that proved true, and that no one could be trusted because the South Korea has already been overtaken by North Korea. And I don't want to say North Korea per se, the regime of Kim Jong-un, but he said communist. So, and that proved out to be true, but still, because he called martial law, I guess he illegally called for martial law. And he obviously was removed as president, but he was right. What did I miss here? Oh, we're right in an hour. I missed reading all the text. Miss anything? Oh, here's we got a couple minutes here. Last few headlines. Wall Street Journal, why the UAE broke up with OPEC, U.S. fracking and the Iran war are causing the oil cartel to fracture, and that's a good thing for the United States. We have an agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is great. Saudi Arabia kind of rules OPEC, but there's so many things going on, and the UAE actually wanted to pump more oil, which would lower oil prices, but also they want to break away from the West here. But regardless, if they pump more oil, oil would go down. Why do they want to pump oil? Well, because of China. And PJ Media has an article, China's surging economy is a major problem for the U.S. The only thing we need to realize about that is it's not. And I read the PJ Media article. We read a similar article in the New York Times. So for PJ Media to parrot the New York Times, I find it funny. China's growth, annual growth is 5.3. For China, for us, that would be fantastic. For China, it's not that big. They were in double digits growth for a long time. So it's not a big deal. Besides, their growth is in a accurate reflection because they have rigged currency and they rig everything. So it's currency manipulation, which nobody else does. So that's an unfair advantage. So that helps. So they're not doing as good as people think. So I don't see why PJ Media would echo that. And also, if you watch Jeopardy, if you ever watched the show Jeopardy, they recently had a reign of this guy, Jamie Ding, who was a communist agent. And of course, he comes out after his winning streak and he says, Jamie Ding hopes winning streak shows immigrants in a positive light. This is from Fox News. The 33-year-old law student's run ended Monday in a loss after winning $882,000. This guy was total communist. He introduced himself. He put his occupation as bureaucrat. I think it was rigged, but either he was a ringer, that I think China put a ringer in there, because there were a lot of very overt like propaganda things. But I thought it was funny. More China news. Just the news. Chinese national indicted in COVID-era hacking scheme, arrested in Italy, extradited to Texas. Oh, I thought I had the text for that. I had the guys' names and everything. So if you don't know, the United States is replete with espionage and propaganda and psyops, including Jamie Ding playing on Jeopardy. So it's everywhere. Everywhere the propaganda is. Not only that, but they pair it together with this overwhelming espionage schemes. They're flying drones over military bases. They're trying to crash in military bases. They're smuggling in bad pathogens. They're smuggling out biological research. I mean, if you really knew what was going on here, your head would explode. And in the meantime, they're manipulating their economy. And here again, they're using their favorite tactic. They're saturating the market. They don't care if they take a loss, but they want to get people out of America in electric cars. Reuters, for the average price of a car in the U.S., you could buy 5 Chinese EVs. And the New World Order, the elite establishment, they're all for this. Because China was supposed to be the manufacturing hub of the world. And they wouldn't restrict their energy capacity or whatever. So it is really, you have to understand, it's the world elite and socialists worldwide and the communist Chinese. That's the establishment wanting to supplant U.S. constitutional individual rights. Zero Hedge, some tech news before we close out here. 25,000 ground robots and battlefield planned by Ukraine for frontline logistics. And a move toward fully autonomous warfare. And that's what they've been doing this. And they did it with biologics too, with pathogens. That's why they had all these chemical and biological weapons plants in Ukraine, because Ukraine will be the testing ground for the advanced weaponry, much to the chagrin of the Ukrainian people, who now have to use robots because all their young men are dead. So this, I think Ukraine is the most egregious war. It's almost like I can understand the war in Iran. It's logistics, right? You don't want China and Iran and Russia to control the Strait of Hormuz. If there was ever a conflict, or if the Chinese tried to take Taiwan, and then at the same time block the Hormuz. In any case, the thing in Ukraine, very, very dangerous. A long, slogging war of attrition against the Russians is meant for however long it takes. They said about 20 years. I think that's it, right? I got it in about an hour. I don't know what's happening here. Everything's blinking. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Won't be here for the next couple days. Into the long weekend. And but I will be back Monday. Maybe a special report over the weekend. I don't know. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. I will see you Monday. Respect.
Conspiracy. You know that it's a conspiracy. These people are crazy. These people are crazy. Less than 3% of you people read books.